Oh, I just got on. It's nice.
Did you just finally get on?
Are we here? We're live, aren't
We're
we?
live, actually. So welcome to
Hi, everyone.
DTLT today.
Hi.
We have a special episode today because I have what I could probably fairly describe as our number one fan at this point. If ever there were a credential that would hold some weight like that, that would be Leslie.
Oh, she's a fan, all right.
Leslie,
She's our number one fan.
number one. Leslie Lindballe, 1% Yellow on Twitter. You follow the DS106 stuff, the radio stuff. You've gotten on there with your ukulele ever so often. And you've been following the DTLT Today stuff and catching up on prior episodes and stuff.
And I want to start this episode by welcoming you, obviously. And she's 1% yellow and she's 99% mellow. So you know. And the other thing, Leslie, is...
Do I need to move somewhere so that...
I'll make it. I don't know.
And you guys deal with the technicality. I remember the personality of the show. One of the things that I want to ask you, and this is a big thing, is what in God's name possessed you to go back and watch all 78 episodes? 78 episodes, which you said is amounting to 25 hours of your life.
Well, actually, it's 79 episodes. Today is the 80th episode. Keep up with the numbers here.
Thank you for
correcting. So the first episode that I watched was episode 27 that you had blogged about.
Okay.
When you folks were talking about the online learning initiative that's happening at UMW. And that's actually where I've entered into most of your world, is through the Copolac group and my undergraduate university, which is Augustana. Right. We heard about the online learning initiative that you were working on, and there was, kind of that call put out for reviewers, and I wanted to be a part of that, but we kind of just had, in that sense, we just were missing each other.
The email, it's like
Miss Skype and email, and nothing was really working out. But on the other side, I was interacting with you guys on a daily basis through Twitter and DS106 Radio, and then I found this DTLT Today that spoke directly to this online learning initiative. And so I wanted to kind of understand who would be playing a major role in this online learning initiative, because if it's online, it's going to be going through the DTLT office. Yes. Really, you guys are going to be
officially true now. UMW
playing a major part in that. And so I thought if I could come to a better understanding of who you all were within the larger picture of UMW, that I might also have a better opportunity to begin a conversation with some of the people at Augustana that I'm trying to get interested in the project that you guys are working on.
Wow. So you just, without question, do your homework. And you do it thoroughly.
I feel so unprepared.
Exactly. It's just amazing. Well, I'm glad that worked out. I heard you talk with Steve Greenlaw, and now you're officially going to be part of the UMW online review process for liberal arts classes online. So that's awesome. And I have one more question for you before I hand it over to Tim and Andy. Whatever happened with that? Like, I emailed you and the professor from Augustana and Steve, and it seemed to, never go anywhere. Did I mess that up? Or did it just never go?
I think it's just that, sometimes you talk to people in a place where they don't live. Like if you leave a note for your roommate, inside the fridge, and they always eat out at restaurants, then they're never going to get that note. And I think that's what happened, is we were all trying to use spaces where the other people didn't necessarily live or weren't going to be interacting, and so we just kept missing each other. And it's kind of an interesting part about this online world, and especially what you guys are doing with the openness in comparison to right now I'm kind of living in Athabasca, which is mostly a closed system, and so I'm kind of negotiating this open world and closed world, and all of this kind of stuff, and really thinking about what it means to be living in an online space.
Well, and so let's talk about that some, because I know you're doing some stuff in Alec Kouros' class. That's ECI and then a bunch of numbers. I can't remember, so help me out with that.
831.
ECI 831. Tell me a little bit about that.
Follow the hashtag.
So tell me about your work with that, and you get on the radio every so often. So your entrance into some of these online spaces, how you found out about them and got involved with it.
She just told you.
I guess that first my involvement with DS106 was through Jabiz Reizdana, otherwise known as Intrepid Teacher, and he joined in the DS106 storytelling course in January, and so I started kind of following what he was doing, and that's certainly how I got to following Jim, and yeah, I don't even know how I got involved with the radio. Just one day turned it on and then
started singing into it.
I don't know. The rest is history, I suppose.
It just becomes a part of your life and a part of who you are.
Yeah, it certainly has become a part of my life. And it's interesting. I've got I don't have it here, but I have a few sheets of drawings that I'm putting together as I'm working my way through Alec's course. And actually, I've just opened a Flickr account and have uploaded some pictures of that. But I have, beside your name, Tim, the DS106 radio, or DS106 becomes for life, because really that's how you've ended up in with this crew of DTLT folk. But
and I'm all the
but in
better
Alec's
for it.
course, in Alec's course, I'm basically using you guys and Augustana as my final project. My hope is to be able to produce a video, or maybe it might be a couple of videos, that begin a conversation between the two schools. And actually today an email was sent out to all of the staff and faculty at Augustana asking them to self-select if there's anyone that's interested in participating in that conversation with me, to get a hold of me, and hopefully I'll have some questions or concerns or skeptical approaches or opinions about the possibilities for liberal arts online, coming out of where my liberal arts grounding is, and a school that full of people that I highly respect their opinion, and so that's why I would like to be able to start that conversation, is so that both sides can kind of utilize what the other group has to offer. I think that's really what Copelac is about anyway. It's a group of schools that are really invested in liberal arts and thinking about what that means and sharing what those possibilities are.
Absolutely.
Now, Leslie, one of the things interesting on the Copelac point, did I do you have something? When I was out in Portland, in the Northwest, I went to this thing called the Northwest Association of, the Northwest Academic Computing Consortium. And one of the schools that was there, I think is a Copelac school, is the Evergreen State. Are they Copelac? They sound so
Yes,
groovy.
they are.
They don't have any grades. Their curriculum is something you divine with your kind of advisor, professor. And you really have this kind of very free-flowing relationship with your curriculum and with your education. And they were doing some amazing stuff there in terms of instructional technology. A group of really great people. And I was just, it kind of reaffirmed what you're saying to me, is we can bring this online in some pretty powerful ways. Copelac being one example, but just like I'd love to see what people are doing in Augustana, bring in Evergreen. I mean, I'd like to see a bunch of universities kind of come together and come up with a process, because all these great faculty, all these different schools have been doing it for years. We just want to help them think it through for the online.
It's funny that
And not only in terms of the online teaching and learning, but also one of the things that I've really enjoyed, even with DTLT, is that this is a showcase for what you guys are doing and how you're doing it. So that any other school, and I love how you guys have been so completely open with the process that you've gone through, and how you changed from Justin TV to this Amazon, and what the cost of all of this hosting has been, and even as much as showing us the green screen and all of these types of things. It's really powerful. It really reminded me of when you guys know Dean Sharesky, I'm sure. When he did his K-12 keynote, and then showed the making of the keynote afterward, and shared that process with everyone, because it's not necessarily a straightforward thing if you've never been into this, right? But once you show people that it's not that difficult in the background, then it really gives people the confidence to be able to even approach something like that for themselves and for their own institution.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's something that we carry over even from DS106, where we tell them, don't just show us your final work, show us the process. Blog your process of creating that work, because that's as much, if not more so powerful than just this, final product that you created is what you actually went through to create it, and the story behind it, I think.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
No, it reminded me this morning, Alfie Cohn had tweeted something about, you're familiar with Carleton College? I guess it's Carleton University in Ottawa. They have apparently this Institute of Interdisciplinary Studies, and they have this program called Directed Interdisciplinary Studies. And it's a program that basically allows you to combine your interests, and you justify your degree seeking in this program. It's a fascinating direction to me, and it sounds like the kind of thing that you're taking an active part in. What you want to do, Leslie, is kind of make it all into what you want to do. So I you keep seeing that somebody says something, and this stuff keeps popping up until the idea kind of culminates and becomes a realization.
Absolutely. Two things on that, and this is also for you, Leslie. Is one thing is, I think Mary Washington, one of its real weaknesses as a liberal arts school is it predefines too much of what students have to take for the first 2 years. So it treats it like 13th and 14th grade sometimes. It's just too defined in terms of GE. The general ed is so kind of strict in how many courses and in what fields. Like, it really locks you in to a program of study. Second thing, and this is the thing about online, if we're going to think about online and liberal arts as we're going through this process, one of the things that's scaring me a little bit about online courses, and is scaring me in general about the kind of, what do they call it? Quality matters, whatever you want to call that crap. The basic idea here to me is we have, for online classes, we have trusted instructors that are working to think about how to do this different ways in online. And there's no question in my mind that they probably need help. They need kind of guidance in certain things. They need ideas to get popping. But the idea that we put them through this rigorous evaluation system, this external review that goes on, and unless we make it something generative and positive in a community working towards something, if we make it like this kind of external board that's judging the professor, we're in real trouble. And the fact is this isn't just about UMW's online quality issue. This is like quality issues for online courses in general, and how the Department of Education and accreditation bureaus are going about evaluating the online course as if it's something completely different from what we do in our classrooms. And for me, it leads to an issue of control, power, and further kind of disenfranchisement of professors and students from the curriculum they teach. And I think that's really something that when we go through this process, we have to keep in mind, because it's the single most dangerous part about these quality issues when we come to online learning. And there's a fine line there, but it's an important one. It's one I think we need to keep in mind. Excuse me. Wow. I'm just getting over an illness. Forgive me.
Yeah, no, I saw it the other day.
So Leslie, where is this ultimately going for you? What is that too?
In terms of my wish list, or
Where do you, when you're done
in-
with
in-
at least this next round of schooling, where do you hope to be with at the end?
DTLT.
There you go. In Fredericksburg, Virginia, right?
Of course.
Well, there's a few things. I won't be approaching my final project until next year. I still have some courses that I need to complete. A couple of them will be at Athabasca. One of them will be on narrative education, because I think that storytelling, both in terms of the instructor being able to model storytelling, as well as giving space for students to create a meaningful story of their own that integrates theory, is a really powerful way for students to be able to use what they're learning. And I mean, if it's not useful, then why are you learning it? And further, actually, this actually leads kind of into some of my questions for you guys. Is the story of the institution itself. I think that that the way that the Kopelak schools present themselves as individual institutions, as well as a part of this larger group, will be really interesting to look at. A part of, when I was about halfway through watching all of these DTLT Today episodes, I started to think, who are these people in the larger context of the University of Mary Washington, and what are the voices that speak for this entity called the University of Mary Washington? If it were an individual, what part of the psyche would you guys be speaking from? And what are the voices that are sanctioned and the unsanctioned voices that speak to the identity of this space? And one of the things that I really like about UMW is that you have all of these student blogs, student and instructor blogs, they're not censored, they're in the open, and you have this gigantic multitude of voices that you could never actually, in this process, I've realized that it's impossible for me to actually review every bit of information that's put out by under the umbrella of UMW to kind of get a grasp on what the institution would be like as an individual. If I were to consider it as a self or that kind of thing. But I mean, when you guys are doing DTLT Today, do you think of yourselves as speaking for the institution?
I think we kind of think of ourselves in Freudian terms, kind of like the id. We say whatever we want. It's unfiltered, and we hope that the conscience and the superconscience, right?
Well, I
Make
hadn't
some sense of it.
I hadn't even thought of this concept, but in many ways, UMW Blog speaks for what DTLT does, and it's done it in the past couple of years better than anything else has to describe kind of what we do and what we're about and what we want to accomplish. This open area to publish and to reflect and to do the things, to show off student work and to show the life of the mind at Mary Washington. That is what UMW Blogs has done. And it's just kind of bubbled out there, and it is what it is today. So, DTLT Today, I think, is just this kind of reinforcement of some of the ideas that we want to get across, but we're featuring UMW Blogs in many ways on many of the episodes to kind of to show what's going on. So, UMW Blogs is the representation of Mary Washington in a lot of good ways.
To me, what DTLT Today has become is just sort of this, it's a video version of the blog. And what it is it's a group blog for this department where we're going to be able to look back years from now and say, what were we as a department grappling with? What concepts and ideas and things were we thinking about back then? And we'll have this video representation of that same thing, whether it's you hammering out a 5-paragraph blog post about a specific topic, or it's just jumping on the cuddle couch and talking about it. So to me, it's more like a blog. And in that sense, no, I don't think we speak at all for the university. We speak only for us as individuals and us as a collective group and what we're thinking about.
Yeah.
And the other thing I'll say to that is that I've said before, that there are often times where we can look at the university itself and wonder whether our department is really getting the recognition for specific things. There's a lot that gets blown up on the internet about DS-106 is this huge thing and it's mentioned in EDUCAUSE. And I could walk around campus, and it would be a much smaller percentage of people that might even know what DS-106 was right here on this very campus where it happens. So, there's that imbalance there, to where I definitely don't think that we speak for the university as much as we speak for ourselves and try to do things in that regard.
I agree with that. And we represent an interesting phenomenon. I think that's not particular to UNW, and it's not particular really to any school, but it's happening more and more. And the reality is that you can have a far greater niche and a far kind of sense of presence through a network online than often you do in your own school at home. And you see that in a lot of places, and it's an interesting phenomenon because it says a lot about the network and the power of networking. But at the same time, we also serve a very, I think, important function here. We work with faculty, we bring them online, we show them how to do certain things, whether it be in an open publishing platform, Google Docs, I don't care what it is. And I think one of our goals, if we move down, for me, is how do we take what we've done with the radio and with TV and with some of the principles of DS-106 with an open online course and start to introduce that more kind of fundamentally into the work that's happening with the blogs and beyond. I just think we have now, what we've been playing with, and DTLT is a good example of, is we've been playing with the possibilities. And I would hope that the next step would be for us to integrate that into the curriculum back here. Because I do think that feeds directly into the idea of a liberal arts online education. I do think these tools and these pieces are crucial to make that reality that much more compelling. And I think we've been doing it in a fun way, and that's the only way to do it. But I do think that there is some real kind of power behind it, and I think if we lose the fun of it, then it just becomes a job. So we need to keep that. But I do think that there's a real kind of sound possibility for the school and for the school's kind of ability to deal with this. And I think sometimes that we have a low profile amongst faculty and stuff isn't a bad thing. Sometimes I think it could work to our benefit. Yeah, I'm just an instructional technologist. What do you want from me? That can work,
Well, yeah, that's been one of the things that I've wondered. I mean, I have really enjoyed the episodes that you've had faculty on, as well as I know Lee was on one episode and Shannon was on another episode. And it was really cool to hear other voices from the campus being included in the DTLT Today episodes. Further to what you were saying, I see these types of spaces, these completely open places of interaction as key to doing liberal arts online. And I don't know if you guys have very much. If you guys do community service learning or international or experiential outdoor education on your campus, but that's my history with Augustana, as I helped set up the office that kind of manages where everything kind of comes into one space there, all of our off-campus learning. And a lot of the discussion around the value of that type of learning is echoed in this discussion of open online learning as well. It's that there's knowledge that lives within the community that is extremely valuable to students. Not just as raw factoids of information, but it's being able to go out and see knowledge in process as it works in the world, as it affects things, as it is being affected. And I think that any chance that students have to see that on a larger interactive and sometimes even global scale is really beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree entirely. And I think Andy said it best, is I think that's what UMW Blogs represents for us. And I think that's the publishing piece. Now we have the video and audio piece, which I love, because we have this trifecta of open platforms that hopefully we could use together to bring more faculty on, bring more students on. You know, we're still in our infancy, and like when the big toe, see, I'm the big toe of this group. When the big toe goes away for an extended period of time, the little toes have a hard time walking. They scream. They fall. Yeah. But I'm back now. So that big toe will keep the balance and bring people on the cuddle couch and you know, make it real.
Yeah. Otherwise, we're back in the whelping.
It's okay. It's okay. You can still call it the media empire.
Right. But, you know, because you're a hippie, right. We might say collective.
And I hope that this, you know, that this appearance on DTLT today will dispel any myths of me being a stalker. I actually have an academic interest in following you guys, and it's not like I'm just
sound very convincing.
Some creepo.
1% yellow. I've always wanted a stalker. So, I mean, I don't know about, I can't speak for Andy or Tim. But the other thing is there's no reason why you couldn't be not a regular guest, but a regular part of the show. I mean, that's the other thing. Anyone who has the time, jump on. Noise Professor's on it a lot.
And speaking of regular guests in the chat, Julia Forsyth is in the chat right now, and she actually had a question that plays in really well. She wanted to know about how the Teaching Center is integrated into the online learning initiative.
That's a good question. So here at Mary Washington, there's this mythical idea of the Teaching Center. Mythical in that
unicorns.
Yeah, unicorns. And mythical in that, you know, we've been trying to hire this position for 2 years and it just hasn't worked. No, maybe more than that. Maybe 3 years now.
Oh, yeah.
And I only joke partially with mythical, but you know, we're looking for the perfect person to do everything. And that's part of the problem with this job right now is that we haven't focused it to exactly what this director is going to do. What the Teaching Center director would do is basically oversee the Writing Center, the Speaking Center, and us. So it would be a kind of series of resources that this director could pull on to work with faculty. Now, we do that individually, so does the Speaking Center, and so does the Writing Center. You would hope the director, the Teaching Center director, would actually be able to kind of come up with a vision for what, you know, innovative teaching looked at like at Mary Washington, and used us and the various other divisions beneath that it's all confused. It's the director of the Teaching Center. Are we a division? It's the Teaching Center. It's the Writing Center. Like, we don't have the hierarchy set up very well. But to be clear, it's the Teaching Center and the Writing Center, the Speaking Center, and DTLT is beneath that, or report up through that. So you would hope that the director would come up with a vision that would use all of us to our full potential to start working directly with faculty to come up with a vision. The problem there is the director of the Teaching Center is also expected to figure out assessment, is also expected to figure out what's the best way to faculty develop in different... I mean, there's not a clear idea of what exactly their relationship is. They don't have any staff besides the one person, but they have us as centers or as divisions to turn to. That person would have to come up with a vision and then charge us to meet that vision. So, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. They want one, but I don't know if they know what they want it to do just yet. If that makes any sense.
And there's an office space in a new building that hasn't been built yet.
There is. And so, Julia, I'm not sure. I mean, it's a really good question.
Sounds like a DIY position.
Yeah, I mean, it could be amazing with the right person. It could be a complete nightmare with the wrong person, because that means we would have to report through them and they wouldn't like us when we're angry.
Actually, it's been interesting with like the office that I helped kind of establish, or at least I wrote almost all of the protocols for, is called the Learning and Beyond office. And when we reevaluated the core curriculum at Augustana, one course out of the lab office became part of our core curriculum requirements. And I don't know, perhaps that could also become a part of UMW's curriculum requirements or that kind of thing. You know, something that comes through that umbrella of the Writing Center and Speaking Center and DTLT. Or maybe it already is, but...
What the point you brought up earlier about that center that you helped write protocol for is really interesting to me, because once again, we're a liberal arts college, but we focus very much on the traditional idea of education, I think. And, something we don't do a very good job at is community service, is international study abroad. We do some of it, but it's not really built into our curriculum in the way it is other schools. And so we have those things happening in bits and places, but we haven't put a name to it. We haven't kind of put some robust resources behind it and really kind of started to reach out to the community. And I think, if we start to think deeply about what liberal arts are, liberal arts hopefully would challenge some of the kind of traditional notions of the classroom, how much time you spend in the classroom versus in the community. And, every school is going to be different, granted. But when I hear about a place like Evergreen and how they're kind of redefining the model, it makes me wonder, our big overhaul for GE, for general education, was just like, let's give them more credits. Let's redefine. It didn't seem like a solution to anything, especially given credit hours themselves are their own problem when you think about them.
So you said you had a whole host of questions for us. Do you have any others?
Well, those were most of my questions. Were centered around that. Because the other course that I'm taking right now through Athabasca is an autobiographies course.
Huh. Is it?
And I've been completely blocked on this essay for quite a while, and I've.
Well, can we ask you about that course?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Is it an autobiographies course? Do you read people's autobiographies and then write your own? What actually is it about?
No, It's actually, it's 3 parts. I'm just on the first part of it right now, and it's autobiographical discourse, basically, like the theories around autobiography. What is it, and kind of how do we conceptualize it, and especially in terms of truth and representations of self and this kind of thing. But because the field is fairly new, with most of the kind of critical lens beginning to establish itself in the mid to late 80s, and certainly it exploded, and everyone's looking at a lot of the identity politics and stuff like that happened in the 90s offered a number of lenses, and even that you can go into someone's physical space and garner some kind of autobiographical details of how they set up their home, for example. But because as you guys know, the publishing circle is fairly lengthy, there isn't a lot published on autobiography and Web 2.0, and that's kind of what I'm more interested in, because that's where I'm living. And so, as I've been kind of thinking about this and watching this multitude of episodes you guys had out there, I started thinking about it. It really isn't a question of looking at. You can't just look at someone's content online and say this is an autobiography, because it's more like someone's life.
Yeah.
It's not something that's packaged to give you a representation of me. It is me.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that people don't necessarily understand if they don't have their own online life.
Well, it's trippy. What a rich, an unbelievably rich topic. And then you think about the idea of digital identity and the way in which we are living our life through these tools. And who's writing about this and thinking about this is Bonnie Stewart, I think Dave Cormier's partner. And she's, her blog, which was Crib Chronicles for a while, and I think it's still called that, but I'm not sure, really went through some of the most intense, life writing about, her own process as a mother, and just amazing stuff. But then this question of digital identity, which I love it because I think it's such a fraught term, but it's such a fascinating one. And the idea that we're living in these spaces, but we're living in these spaces maybe differently than we live in physical space in some ways, or not. I do think that there is some dissonance between the two, and that there is a little bit of I like to think of it as kind of schizophrenia between what we do online and sometimes what we do otherwise. And people say no, Alan Levine would argue, no, you are who you are online or in physical space, and I'm not convinced of that. I'm not convinced. Physical space is far more constraining than your ability to kind of reconceptualize your identity online. It's so easy to fuck with your identity online in different ways than it is in physical space. And for me, that's what makes it far more alluring. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I tend to buy Alan's argument a little bit more. I mean, there's always something about the realism of how you can express yourself online when you don't have the social kind of, I'm more of an introvert. Other people are more extroverts. I can kind of get at my autobiographical stuff easier online than I can, and this is almost kind of an intermediary. As you say, Leslie, I'm kind of blogging in this medium here. There's a lot of autobiographical stuff that I've done on DTLT today, but a lot of the background stuff, the stuff that really gets to who I am, is the stuff that I'm able to write online. I'm still the same person in real life. It's just I'm introverted. Does that make sense?
And I think that synchronous sessions, they really do, put your identity, the two identities, maybe your online, your digital and analog identity, into a crucible. And they squish them together, because there's something that happens, I think, in synchronous sessions, in this or in Skype or whatever platform at DS106 Radio, that because it's immediate and you don't have that time buffer, and so even though I was watching, it was interesting because I was watching you in DTLT in the past at the same time as I was, Twitter is almost present, just because it's, it happens so quickly, so I was almost interacting with you guys almost in the present, but I tried not to interact with your present selves as I was, looking at your static or your past selves. I find it all really fascinating as well. Unfortunately, I'm having a difficult time articulating
the whole idea in memoir studies or autobiography studies that, it's that existential idea of, are you who you were then, now? Like that whole idea of these different selves, these kind of fragmented selves. And I argue that that's no different from the online and physical space. There's totally fragmented selves. And I think I think it's easy for us to want to reconstitute the self as a kind of presence between online and physical space, and so it makes sense to us. But I think you're right, like the two are constantly in tension, and there's this crucible in which you mix them up, probably to make sense. But I don't see them I see them as almost agonistic, fighting one another. Now maybe that's my own experience with the online presence, but I do see them as agonistic. And I like that about them. You know what I mean?
I see them more as a completing the whole. You get more of a complete picture, and you do somewhat have these different selves in these different mediums, but you put them all together, and you kind of. I think in these days of Web 2.0, we can have more of what describes the whole person, as opposed to well, here's the book that I wrote, or here's the paper that I wrote, and that describes this one part of yourself. Now you see the visual of me, you see my writings, you see me in person when we get outside these network connections, and you get more of a whole person.
And then in my opinion, though, that shows that it can be whatever you want it to be, right? It can be that agonistic self, or it can be that completion of a whole that you already were.
Yeah, it could be fake Jim Green.
But either way, it's a performance.
Sure.
I mean, that's the thing. It's like it's just a performance idea of identity that I think autobiography and memoirs really capture. Is that when you start to frame yourself for an audience, immediately there's something changes about the performance of self. Now, I don't say that's like authentic versus inauthentic self. I don't think that. I think there's just the struggle about just the very kind of notion of self when you're doing it for others. And I think the internet allows all of us to kind of deal with that in new and I think dramatic ways that we're not really thinking about. And I think as institutions of higher ed and critical thinking and critical theory and critical thought, we're not paying nearly enough attention to how much this stuff is starting to frame our notion of identity. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, as you're reminding me, the internet allows us to do these other personalities as well. There's thousands of examples of even us here in the room doing other personalities.
Tina and Andrea,
on the
ladies
web
and gentlemen,
and on TV. I mentioned fake Jim Groom and fake Steve Jobs has been in existence and that sort of thing. But that's all part of that personality.
And I love it how
out.
people really freak out. Like, wasn't there that recent thing when this persona of a gay woman turned out to be this kind of guy from the South?
Yeah, right.
And there was this complete anger around the idea of this person performing something that was so radically different from what he represented. And I'm thinking to myself, quite the contrary. Like, wow, that's amazing. It's amazing that all these people fell for it. And it's amazing how quickly we all become provincial when it comes to identity. We all want to hold on to it and be like, no, you can't break free from it. And once we start to, I think it really starts to tear holes in the matrix of reality, when we start fucking with identity online, because it's so intense.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, one of the papers that have been written on autobiographies online was one of the first instances of it was a guy that misrepresented himself to this girl. Her name was Katie, and she eventually went and met with him, and it was it was a really bad situation. Her mom rescued her and all of this kind of stuff, but then as I'm reading through that. And I mean, that happened in the mid-90s, and that, again, there's been so much change in terms of an online presence that, I would have a difficult time creating a completely fabricated personality for myself online, just because our identities, our online identities are so diasporic, right? I'm everywhere. If you go to Google me, I live in so many different places, and for me to completely hide who I am or to completely fabricate an identity, I think would be a lot more complicated now than it was, whatever that is, 15 years ago or whatever.
And another point you bring up that's a good one is that obviously when you're changing your identity or you're trying to perform a different identity, oftentimes it frames you as kind of, I don't know, pedophile or some sort of stalker, sexual stalker, or, it has that identity change has some real implications in real life in terms of, sexual predators. And so there's that part of the online. Now, that's one small part of it, but it's amazing how quickly the two become conflated into one. So that if I'm arguing for this, I could see someone quickly throwing that in my face, well, the real problem with identity problems is, what do you want to do? Try and pick up a little kid with your fake identity? You know what I mean? I mean, that really, and not to say it doesn't happen, because it does. And that's what's scary. So.
Right, but I find that, and as I can't remember which episode it was where you guys were talking about the legislation passed that was that said that teachers are not allowed to become friends with their students on Facebook, and it's that idea that we still have this this overwhelming belief that there are all of these fake people out on the internet and they're all sexual predators. Well, actually, where we're at now, it's almost like going to your kid's Christmas concert, and we let strangers come into their Christmas concert, and we let Uncle Joe come in, even though he's had half a bottle of whiskey before he's come to the Christmas concert or whatever. But then we can't broadcast that, without having explicit permission from every single parent, because there could be predators out on the internet that aren't already in the audience.
And it's the deep uncertainty that still kind of drives our understanding of the web. that uncertainty of who's watching, of what people are going to do with what we say out of context, and then uncertainty of identity. And I think that's why it's right now the great frontier, right? For us, and for everyone. The internet is the frontier because things like identity and new myths get formed in spaces like the frontier. Think about the West, right?
Exactly.
And that's what's happening right now is new identities, new myths, new questions of, who we are as a culture, now as a world, because it's not even nationally limited, is so fascinating. It's like we're on that space. Right?
Well, I mean, it's the new P.T. Barnums that can take advantage of this new frontier. I mean, it happens again in our history. Maybe there'll be another technology in 50 years that it happens all over again. But it's also that 1% thing that we start to fear. The stuff that really doesn't happen all that much, but it gets magnified when it's that brand new fear.
That 1% yellow journalism.
Exactly. Did we ever get the story about the 1% yellow?
Yeah, where does that come from?
What's that mean?
It's a good point.
Oh, I explained it on DS 106 radio the other night to Cog Dog. You guys weren't around?
Well, you've sung to
Is
Cod
Cog
Dog
Dog
on the
here?
radio
Yeah,
too.
exactly.
So if you sing to us and tell us the story, that'd be great.
Yeah, why don't you sing the 1% yellow story?
So yellow is the best color in the universe, I would argue.
Okay.
Although you guys do have an awfully pretty green screen going on there.
Thank you.
But
Well, it's blue.
but I'd go for yellow. And the 1% part, actually, I suppose I should ask you the question first, even though you're all Americans and you would be outside of the statistic. But are you happy?
I would say yes.
Right now, today. Between these two.
In DTLT land, of course you are, right?
Yeah, we're in our happy place.
Yeah.
At any rate, apparently, back when I got my first email address, I had a friend who was in a stats class, and there was apparently some statistic at the time that said when you ask Canadians, are you happy, 99% of them said no. Or they didn't say yes. They said, sometimes, or not right now, or something like that. And before my friend asked me, or told me the statistic, he asked me, are you happy? And I said, oh yeah. I've got some challenges in life, but that's in everybody. And he said, well, then you're 1%. And so then we started talking about what 1% being 1% meant. And it meant things like, you go into a bank and there's one person in line and you get in line behind them and then like 10 people walk in the door. And so you notice that going, oh, this is a 1% moment, right? These are the little things in my life that happen that make me happy when things just work out seemingly on their own. So it became my email address, and it has spread into my online identity and actually my band identity as well. Like my band name is 1% Yellow too. So I've taken a banjo player under my own identity, which has been really kind of a strange experience in itself as well.
We have to wrap up the show. I've got one last question for you, and I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you, what is your favorite DTLT Today show? And since you've watched all of them.
Oh, wait, I have one more to add to I have one more to add just to Tim's. And who is your favorite regular, host?
Yeah.
Oh, you already asked me who my favorite host is.
Here's what we'll do.
And it's my favorite hostess. And she's so rarely on. It makes
Leslie,
me sad.
what we'll have you do is we'll
really
have you answer the for all three of us. Say each one of us is our favorite, and then we'll tape those individual ones.
Yeah.
And we'll play those when we need to at a later time. So just say Andy is my favorite, Timmy is my favorite.
Andy, you're my favorite.
Now Timmy is my favorite.
Timmy boy, you're my favorite. Martha Burtis is my favorite.
All right,
and of course, Jim Groom, you're my favorite.
You can leave Jim out.
That was not convincing at all. That was the least convincing of all four. Unbelievable. What the hell? I'm the personality behind the show.
I also really enjoyed the pure silliness of the episode where you guys dressed up as Tina and what was it, Andrea?
Yeah, Andrea
was the episode.
And apparently I got caught doing something in that episode too.
I also liked seeing all of Jim's family on. the other day. Or yesterday, I guess that
Right.
was.
That was fun.
Yeah. Oh, it's hard to say. Perhaps my first episode 27, when you guys were talking about the online learning initiative, because it really got me interested in what you were doing and kind of blew off the DTLT doors for me. So
And it is
we'll go with the entry level.
It is one of the few episodes that includes Martha Burtis.
Burtis, that's
so
right.
That's fair.
And she's
you.
very articulate.
Yeah. So, well, Leslie, thanks for being on the show. I know it ran rather long, but thank you for taking your time out to talk with us today.
Awesome. Thank you,
That's
Leslie.
great.
Looking at the clock, this might be the longest episode
I think
yet.
so.
How long is it?
Are you gonna up? Are you?
Oh, we've got to be getting close to an hour
Are you
already.
gonna
That's
update
what
this-
happens when you have a good guest.
Make sure you update the spreadsheet.
I will. Special guest, 1% yellow.
You rock.
All right. Take
Thanks,
care,
Leslie.
Bye-bye, Leslie.
And thank you all for watching. Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you.